Well, thank you all for joining us this evening. My name is Dave Eaton. I'm the Dean and Vice Provost of the Graduate School at the University of Washington. I have the usual reminder that before we get started, please make sure that your phone is off or on silence in respect for our honored speaker this evening. So I am going to unhide the screen and start a video short that explains a little bit about the University of Washington and the history of where we're at.
We believe in justice and fairness, that everyone should have equal opportunities to pursue their passions and contribute to society. What happens when we declare ourselves blind to color,
to culture,
to gender,
to faith, to difference? Who are we erasing when we go blind? Our world is no utopia, and blindness to difference will not solve our problems.
Ignoring them won't make them go away.
Instead, we must act. Every day, we have countless opportunities to engage.
Let's start acknowledging our shortcomings and talk about them, not about them in other people, but in ourselves and in our workplaces,
our living places, and in the places where we study and learn. Let's talk about how we can hold ourselves accountable, and about how we can make changes and take action right here, right now. Let's keep the conversation going.
So we are here tonight to keep the conversation going. The foundation of this digital short that you just saw was from Anamari Kalse, then interim president, now our regular president of the University of Washington's call for Race and Equity Initiative, and this series is a part of that initiative. While recognizing both President Kalse and those who helped create this initiative, we're fortunate to have such visionary leaders who care about racial and social justice in this world, in this state, in the city, and at the University of Washington. At the end of the video, you saw the clip. We asked you to please act, please keep the conversation going. One way the graduate school has responded to this call for action is by offering a year-long 8-lecture series of meaningful talks, expose and explain transgressions and struggles, both systematic and personal, experienced by too many of us in our communities today. And these series of speakers feature thought leaders from our campus. In fact, the last lecture will be one of our very own, Marika Klawater, and leaders from across the world, as we will hear this evening. They come here to help us open our eyes to the consequence of prejudice and help us seek solutions for change. Tonight, we are proud to present our 7th of this 8-lecture series with the title Microaggressions, Power, Privilege, and Everyday Life, with our speaker, Toure. Throughout this academic year, we've had a chance to talk about so many important issues, and these issues have brought up a lot of emotions, and they should. Tonight, I ask everyone, please enjoy our speaker, and remember that the UW remains committed to creating a safe space for everyone. We ask everyone to please remember to be respectful of one another and to allow our speaker the space to present his thoughts. Following the talk, you will have an opportunity to ask speaker questions via either the asktoure@uw.edu, that's asktoure@uw.edu, or via one of the microphones on the aisles that will be activated. So let me do a very brief introduction to Toure, and then we will hear from him this evening. It's been written about him that, quote, his enlightening social commentary is inescapable, and it's what we always need to hear. Toure's been a contributing editor to Rolling Stone, a host of Fuse TV's The Hip Hop Show, and On the Record, as well as a columnist for Time.com and a contributor to Vice magazine. He is the celebrated author of the book, Who's Afraid of Post-Blackness? What It Means to Be Black Now? Toure takes a courageous look at what it means to be black in the age of Obama. Please join me in welcoming Toure.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, guys. Thank you for coming and spending some of your evening with me. I really appreciate it. I've had such a warm welcome from everyone in Seattle today, so thank you so much for that. So I want to start with a joke that I love from Hannibal Buress, who I love. And it's a joke about apple juice. And Hannibal loves apple juice. He loves it so much that he has looked into ways of how to manufacture his own apple juice. But of course, the corporations have made it too complicated to acquire all the ingredients, and he can't make it himself. Urgh! So he goes to a store one day, and they're having an incredible sale, 6 gallons of apple juice for $1. And he's like, oh my God, honey, he says to his girlfriend, we have to buy as much apple juice as we can carry before these people realize the massive mistake they've made selling apple juice for this cheap price. So he's in line with his girl, and he's so happy. And there's this old man in line just like looking at them like, "Rrr." And he's like, look, old man, we didn't take all the apple juice. It's right there in aisle 6. If you want your own, go get it. There's plenty more for you. And he says, I was so happy about the apple juice that for a moment I was living in a world where there was no racism and the old man was not looking at us because my girlfriend was white. And I love that story because it kind of gets at how we can approach racism with a sort of double consciousness that lets us be aware that it exists, and we have to be aware that it exists. We're not going to fall for the myth that it ended when Obama became president, because if we're not aware that it exists, then we'll be confused about the world around us, and we'll misunderstand why we and people who look like us have less success in America than we deserve. If we say racism did not exist, then how do we explain the overwhelming success of white men in America? Do they work harder? Are they inherently smarter? Of course not. So if we don't understand that racism exists, then we won't understand their success. But if we're over-aware of racism, then we're not going to be able to have those moments of joy like he had with the apple juice. We'll be spiritually paralyzed, right? And unable to have those sort of blissful breakthroughs. But also this sort of joke story is a great example of a microaggression, right? This sort of racism that you guys are most likely to encounter on a normal day. It's like the pennies of racism, right? But it still hurts, right? I don't say that to minimize its potential to hurt us. A microaggression is an interaction that perpetuates difference, that enforces marginalization, that posits normalcy or exoticism, and communicates superiority. And sometimes these interactions are unintentionally racist, but they still hurt. I remember I was arguing with a friend once who's white about Trayvon Martin, and he finally dismissed me saying, well, you're biased. So I'm biased, I'm affected by race, but he is not, all right? And this is a white man who's married to a black woman. So if I try to say to him, dude, you're being racist, he'd be like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, you know who I'm married to. I actually introduced the two of them. So you start to see where it gets a little bit complicated, but in his opinion, in his mind, his opinion was central and mine was a standard deviation away, right? And his opinion mattered more because mine was somehow colored by race, but his was not. Another one, once when I was at MSNBC during Black History Month, and I was the only black person on my team of 15 people who worked to put together the show, and it came down to us from a black woman who, now I'm remembering that we're broadcasting. It came down to us from higher up that we were supposed to talk about Black History Month more on the show. And somebody in the group said, Black History Month, and made a sound. I can't police a sound, but he's clearly suggested to the entire room, this is silly. what am I supposed to do? Now I'm supposed to be the policeman for the idea of Black History Month? Well, as I'm dealing with that, and I'm dealing with nobody in the room has said anything to say, hey, dude, come on, this is serious. During Black History Month, then somebody says, well, what about White History Month? This is not, I mean, like, we can laugh now because now it's funny here, but when I'm the only black person in the room with 15 white people and someone says that and nobody says anything, that's very painful. That hurts me, that isolates me. I feel other, I feel different. And now I have to stand up for Black History Month during Black History Month because if I don't say anything, then I'm a chump. So I say to him, you know, White History Month is every month. But now he's offended. Right? And everyone else thinks Toure is the radical crazy who thinks every month is White History Month. Why am I even dealing with this stuff at work? I'm just here to put on a television show and not deal with all this extra stuff. And yet we have to. You know, when you think about when someone starts sort of blacking up when they talk to you, right, or adopting what they think is your culture, right, that becomes very microaggressive. And look, I don't want to, oh my God, you know, I used to wear MSNBC sweatshirts sometimes when I would go home after work, and we live really near this sort of fancy bake deli or whatever, fancy grocery store. And finally, this woman who worked there as a butcher said to me, you know, I just figured out who you are. One of the other customers told me who you are, and I saw you all these months wearing MSNBC clothes, and I assumed you worked there, and I assumed that you were a cameraman. And it was all going so well till she said that. And then I'm like, why would you think that I'm a cameraman? Why would you not assume, and I'm a producer, why would you not assume that I'm on the air? And look, you know, I don't want to make it like, you know, these things only go in one direction, because we have to be vigilant about being aware of who we are and what we are doing and how we're moving in society and what our own blind spots are. As I was preparing this talk with you guys, I was thinking about, well, what has come at me? And I was reminded of something that I did that I was embarrassed about. We were having an argument within our team on the show about the name of the Washington, D.C. professional football team, right? And it was a gender mixed room, but of course it was mostly the guys who were having this argument back and forth and taking both sides. And a woman who I love and who I value said, well, I'm a Redskins fan, and I was a little offended. And I said, well, can you name one player on the team? And, you know, she was immediately upset. And I immediately realized what I had done, right? I had sort of pulled rank on her as a guy, saying like, oh, you want to talk about sports? Well, can you get specific? And I would never have done that to a man who said, oh, I'm a fan of the Warriors. Well, can you name 2 Warriors? I would never do that. And, you know, it made me have to think and go inside and deal with like, okay, so where are my blind spots that I was not aware of? It was my lack of awareness that led to that happening. You know, you think about sort of, sometimes what happens is you become a sort of bull in a china shop, and you're unaware of where people's natural sensitivities would be. And you're sort of swinging your arms around, and you don't realize, like, well, I just hurt that person's feelings. But no, you just weren't thinking, you just weren't being aware. And, you know, these microaggressions become reminders of inferiority and difference, which is part of why they're so painful and pernicious. They're, you know, when you're dismissing someone's lived experience, right? This is extraordinarily painful to other people. And I think also about something I call the resume check, right? Where somebody sort of assumes that you don't belong where your body is, and they just want to see to make sure that you're in the right place. When I was first at MSNBC as a guest, I was relatively younger. This was about 5, 6, 7 years ago. I didn't really own any suits. And I knew that they shoot you from the waist up, right? You're at a desk, and so I would just wear a blazer and a shirt and jeans. And people would be like, so where are you from? Like, can I just see your resume? Because I don't understand why you're standing here waiting to go on the air. So I went home, and I went shopping, bought some suits. Nobody ever again asked me, why are you here? Suddenly I seemed to belong there. I remember going to Italy about 12 years ago to work on my second book at this writer's retreat that a lot of college professors would go to. You had to apply to be part of it. You had to send in recommendations to prove how serious you were about your project. And after I get there, one of the professors said to me, her first words to me, barely said hello, and said to me, "How did you get here? Like, I don't understand how you earned the right to be at the same writer's retreat as me. How did you qualify? Because the demographic evidence does not add up for me." And she wanted to look at my free papers to see if I was supposed to be there. So, no, not happening. So when she said, "How did you get here?" I said, "By plane." But if I had said, "Okay, I'll tell you my resume because I'm proud of my resume and I feel like I belong here, and you've asked to hear it in a condescending way, but I'll tell you, I've already published a book, I'm working on my first novel, I've been to graduate school at Columbia, I've written for Rolling Stone a lot," that was my resume at that time, and I might have convinced her that I deserved to be there, that I belonged to be there, but a wave of shame would have rolled through me at submitting to her test and submitting to the idea that she is the dominant person who could just look to see, like, is your resume okay? Okay, why does she get to check my resume? So, these sort of moments are emotionally scarring. And I can remember moments throughout my life, when the teacher in second grade was like, "Can I touch your hair?" Or these sorts of things. Like, you remember, it makes you feel different. It hurts, it leaves scars. And, I've been dealing with black and white sort of microaggressions, but we already know that this goes much further than those dynamics. When someone notes how an Asian person talks without an accent, right? Like, what is that, right? But trying to push them back into a box. When we assume that the woman with a stethoscope is a nurse, right? When we catcall a woman on the street, right? When we tell women to smile, right? These are microaggressions that are reminding us of our stereotypes, our pre-chosen roles, and trying to enforce those boundaries. And you can't just shrug this stuff off. You can't just ignore it. Sociologists talk about the looking glass self, which means that you see the world as you see yourself as the world sees you, right? You can't easily divorce those things. And microaggressions just are yet another reminder, bringing society's views into your face. This is the role that you're supposed to play. Let me remind you of that. And the idea, and what this becomes quite easily, is a trigger for stereotype threat. Right? The idea that when you fear being judged by a stereotype, or you fear living down to it, that alone is disruptive enough to negatively impact your performance. The concept of stereotype threat holds that we know the perceptions that society has about the group that we belong to, right? The group we're assigned to because of our body. You know what society thinks of people who look like you, whoever you are, right? And you're reminded of that in part by microaggressions as you go throughout your life. And when the stereotypes are attached to negative traits that we don't want to replicate, it hinders us because you get a sort of anxiety around trying to disprove the stereotype, which makes doing a difficult task even more difficult, right? You're using extra mental and spiritual energy just to get it done. John is just doing the test, right? His ancestors are not standing on top of him as some sort of thing that he has to supersede. But Kwame is multitasking because he's doing the test while also thinking about, hey, I don't want to be yet another black man who can't hack it in this challenging class. But he's multitasking, right? And sociologists tell us, scientists tell us that multitasking is generally the road to lesser performance and is perhaps even impossible because your divided attention just ruins your ability to concentrate at all. And for some of us, we're multitasking all the time. Malcolm Gladwell talks about a scientific test where he gave black kids the SAT, and then before giving it to them a second time, he subtly reminded them that they're black, just having them write on the top of the paper their race, just activating the knowledge that their test will be scored in accordance with, in awareness of their race. And they will be looked at as black people rather than as individuals. And their scores go down. Reminding people activates internalized prejudices. And microaggressions, as I've said, are constant reminders of where you stand in society. Gladwell said that this works in many different ways, right? If you take rich white kids and have them jump and measure that, and then you have a black teacher come in to measure them on the second go-round, just subtly reminding them of the stereotype that whites are lesser athletically than blacks, they jump less high, right? Extraordinary. There's this Dave Chappelle sketch that I love that hopefully some of you will remember that touches on microaggressions. Who remembers the first When Keeping It Real Goes Wrong sketch, right? Where he's working at the Fortune 500 company and they close the big deal and his white mentor, right, his friend, his homie says, yeah, Dave, give me some skin. And he's like, why are you talking to me like that? I don't talk to you like that. And he's offended. And what does Dave do? He screams on the guy and he turns over the table and he ends up working at a gas station, right? Like washing the windows, right? So we can't obviously, we feel the sort of pain that he feels, but we can't go Rambo or Chappelle every time someone tries to put us in a box via microaggressions, right? We need a more emotionally productive response than that. Because you can sometimes walk away from these interactions very hurt and feeling deep pain, but what do you do? One thing you don't need to do is to educate the other people in the conversation. You are not here as a black person or a woman or a gay person or a woke person or whatever. You're not here to educate every fool you come across. That is not your job, right? Every time they put their foot in their mouth, you're not there to liberate them from themselves. That work is time-consuming, it is exhausting, right? It is emotionally taxing, and it's entirely external. It does nothing for you in the work of educating yourself so you can get to a better career or a larger career or perform your career and move forward with your family and your internal growth. It does nothing for your soul. It does nothing to improve you. Their ignorance is their problem. It's not a fire that you need to extinguish. Now, some of you may be saying, well, no, I need to check that shit right here and now before it runs rampant. And I understand you. And if the sister who was in the last session with us was like, I need to check that shit, and if I don't, then I feel bad. And I feel you. And if I don't say anything, then I feel bad too. I get that. But you have to remember that you can't change someone's mind. It is and I'm not talking just about race. This runs through everything. This is scientifically documented. There's a whole This American Life that you can listen to about it. You cannot change someone, you cannot budge them from a deeply held belief. When you present people who hold a belief deeply with countervailing evidence, they tend to double down on their belief, right? When you tell your crazy right-wing uncle who loves Donald Trump that, look, it's impossible to deport 11 million people, it's impossible to build a wall, it's impossible to block Muslims from coming in the country, we cannot do these things, and he will more deeply believe that Donald Trump is right. That is the way that human beings are wired. So you can't just educate these people out of their deeply held beliefs. You only sort of rile up your own emotions and create these sort of emotional roadblocks in your day where you're stuck thinking about this incident that happened that is painful to you, and the other people have sort of moved on from it. There's got to be another way. Let me sketch out another way. Once I was in a little restaurant in Manhattan, this little Italian joint, really nice place. I'm at a table with 5 black men who are older than me, who I looked up to, all of them very accomplished, and we're the only black people in the whole place. But we didn't really care about that. We went in, we sat down, we started chopping it up and talking about the future and what we're gonna do. And then this white guy, sitting at another table across the room, and I remember this like it just happened a minute ago, comes over to the table and puts his arms around 2 of us and says, they let black people in here? I swear to God, this happened. Now, this comment is so insane that we all assumed that one of us must know him. So we all start looking at each other like, is that your white man? Is that your, no, it's not yours? Because he must be yours. He's not mine. I tell you, he's not mine. And nobody knew him. And it was like, oh my God, I can't believe he thought this was an appropriate joke. And when we realized that we didn't know him and that he was just a stranger making a terrible joke, we did something really cool. We ignored him. Right? Somebody ran over and like ushered him away from us, but we like literally, I mean, his arms were around me, so we like literally brushed him off our shoulders, but we went back to the conversation that we were having. We didn't talk about him, we didn't look over there, we paid him no mind. We went right back to the evening we were having, and I know all those guys, we've never discussed it again. Even when they read it in my book, they're like, oh, that's nice. Next, right? Because we're about moving forward and we're not dealing with that. We truly ignored that man, and I was proud of us as a group for doing that. And that sort of resilience and refusal to be mortally damaged by microaggressions is what I hope some of you can develop out of what I'm talking about and out of what you guys are doing in this quarter studying this sort of stuff. And I'm going to try to talk about some of the ideas that I have around how to build something that will protect you from the microaggressions. Because it's not just an external ignoring of offensive people, but an internal zen that I'm trying to talk about, such that after these verbal bombs are dropped on you, you're able to move forward as we did and continue gaining education and continue being productive at work because you're strong enough that you know your worth and your value, such that when someone tells you you are not as valuable as you think you are, you're lesser, you're whatever, you can take that and flick it off because your self-identity is so strong that you are not hurt. Because you know that that's reflective of their mind and not of yours. That you know that microaggressions are the end result of macroaggressions, right? Microaggressions are opinions born out of centuries of macroaggressive practices. And we know that the macro picture of race remains a system of inequities and inequalities that produce more and more difference in order to maintain the superiority of white men in general and the superiority of a specific group of rich white men in specific. And even though a few black and brown people get through here and there, we can still see that we have a series of interlocking systems that want to maintain the status quo. For example, there has been a systematic theft and denial of wealth to the black community throughout American history, right? At times, government-sanctioned policies created that difference. One example, in the 1950s, the Federal Housing Authority gave out lots of loans to help create home ownership because they understood that home ownership is the backbone of a strong economy. 95% of those loans went to white families. So the government, for years, was helping white families move up the ladder and acquire wealth and acquire home ownership, and not helping black families and brown families in the same way. So creating difference, right? There has been in this country all sorts of systems like that that have produced a society where black and brown people have a lesser chance of making it or creating wealth or getting educated or avoiding jail. And that microclimate, which creates and perpetuates difference, that is the environment that fuels microaggressions, that creates situations that spawn stereotypes that become microaggressions. People see rampant black poverty and say, well, in America, everyone has a chance, so black failure must be a character failing. And of course, nothing could be further from the truth. Now, for some of you, the macro climate may feel a whole lot more combative and tense than it did a year ago, because nowadays we're in the era of Donald Trump. And it feels heavier, I think, to be in America right now. He seems to have unleashed something from deep within the basement of America, and now our racist goblins are out to squawk. And I know that they have been there forever, and they never left, but I swear it's different now. It feels different now because they are more emboldened to speak out and to say more and to be louder and to be more angry and more racist than we've seen in recent years. This movement has been forming for a long time around the fears of some white people that they were losing control of the country. Right? One key predictor of being a Trump supporter is believing that white people are losing out in this country. And we've seen studies where they discuss how white people see race as a zero-sum game which they are losing. Whiteness and blackness, of course, don't have real biological bases, but they've been part of our society for so long that they are ingrained within us with meaning. And for some white people, and I don't want to overgeneralize, you know if I'm talking about you or not, but for some white people, whiteness is wrapped up in superiority or preeminence. That is definitional to white people. And if that's what your identity is about, then to think of losing that would be extraordinarily painful. And for many Trump voters, there's a deep fear of the loss of centrality of whiteness, and they rally around him to support themselves. Trump's big enemies and his community's big enemies are Barack Obama, Mexican immigrants, Muslims of all sorts, Megyn Kelly, and China. It sounds like white men against the entire world, right? Blacks, browns, Muslims, Asians, women, we got everybody. We're going to take them on. We're stronger than everybody. Trump is appealing to that fear of the loss of centrality of whiteness. And Trump's appeal to the good old days and his attack on political correctness show him yearning for a return to the days when white men ruled without guilt or fear, said whatever they wanted, didn't have to apologize, and even be thoughtful about what women and blacks and gays might need. The toughest guy ruled, and that was good. Trump is the embodiment of this country's racist id, standing up for one last growl, trying to save itself, trying to push back progress we've made with race, with women, with immigration, with gay rights. He represents a war where it's the straight white working class men against everyone else. And he's emboldening the craziest fringe of this country to feel powerful, to feel the right to speak out against political correctness. And it seems truly scary at times. So what do you do? How do you deal with a nation that seems to hate you or to want to exclude you? A nation that is microaggressing and macroaggressing against us and causing deep spiritual pain. I used to feel excluded from the American dream. I felt like an other. I felt the microaggressions with acute pain, like every time some white person said something dumb to me. But what I tried to do was to build a sort of Teflon shield inside of me that would protect my self-esteem and my self-image from attack, right? And it's really a sort of four-part shield. It has four elements that can combine to help mostly protect your spirit from the assault of microaggressions, right? This is not a foolproof shield, right? It can't protect you from everything, but it can mitigate the pain of a lot of microaggressions, right? So one part that's necessary is a sense of self that is crystal clear. See, when someone commits a microaggression, part of what's painful is they're not really speaking to you. They're speaking to an idea of you. They're speaking to a bias-inflected vision of you based more on your demographics and less on your individual characteristics. And it hurts to be seen that way, to be lumped in and lose your individuality. So you must develop a sharp sense of self. And what I really mean there is a clear sense of your worth and value. You deserve to think a lot of yourself because you're a human being. If you know that you're a valuable person, a smart person, a good-looking person, if you know who you are and how important you are, it's a little bit harder for someone to push you out of that and into a box. You should know that you are awesome, and that will help you survive in a world that's doubting that. But part two of the shield, you must be aware of the stereotypes and attacks that will come your way because of the body that you're in, because you should not be shocked by anything. You must have a double consciousness about it, however, which means you can see it in two ways. You're aware of the stereotype about your group, but you're also aware that it's a stereotype, it's a myth, it's not real, it's not reality. You may be in the group, but you are unique within it. Like I know there's a stereotype, let's say, of criminality within black men. They think we're criminals even though the overwhelming majority of us have never committed a crime. I know that, and being aware of that stereotype allows me to interact critically with the information coming at me from media and microaggressors. I know the joke they're riffing on, and I can see through it, but at the same time, I know I'm not that, and I've never been that. I can see myself apart from the stereotype. I know that I'm bigger than that. And part of what helps me get to that, even though I've been working on that for a while internally, is to meditate. And when you do that, you can start to see your thoughts as separate from you. That when you are, before I was meditating, it would be like, my mind was like I was watching a movie from the front row. And the movie was a bit chaotic. I didn't really have control of what would be on it, but that's just what it was. When I started meditating, I could start to see my thoughts, so as if I can see the projector putting my thoughts on the screen, and you understand, I am not my thoughts. I am bigger than that. There's a different I other than what I'm thinking, and I can interact critically with my thoughts. So your thought that black men are criminals, that can sit over there, and over here I can have my self-image and know, that's not me. That's what you think of me, but I'm over here. And meditation practice has helped me to see these different ideas more clearly in this way, right? And see ideas as things in and of themselves rather than sort of just taking over me. The third part of the shield is an active and conscious rejection of the superiority of the dominant group that you're not a part of. You are being bombarded with messages about the superiority of the dominant group. They come at you all the time, and you will need some period in your life where you are in the habit of taking them down within yourself and raising yourself up. I'm not talking about hating, I'm talking about loving yourself so much and having a mental journey that may require you to attack the colonization in your mind. The way the dominant group makes you believe that in their inherent superiority has to be attacked. You have to conquer that within yourself. One of the greatest artistic examples of this for me was in Quentin Tarantino's Django Unchained, right? Which was all about the attack and the defeat of the colonized mind, right? Django, played by Jamie Foxx, is destroying this inside himself from the first moment that he is liberated, and he throws off the burlap sack and he walks with this great body language toward his own horse. And through the movie, we see him walking tall, shoulders back, head held high, sitting on top of horses, and people are, this constant sight gag throughout the movie when people see him, they're like, oh my God, he has dignity. Oh my God, it's so shocking. Because he's conquered the colonized mind inside of himself, because he knows his self-worth. And at the end of the movie, this is what saves him. I hope that I am not ruining this for people, because it's been out for several years, so you should have seen it by now. But by the end, toward the end, he's trapped and he's being taken to what has been described as the worst place for a slave to go, the quarry, where they just have you breaking rocks to the end of your days and you die and get thrown in a ditch. But he is speaking to the white men as if he is an equal to them, even though he's in handcuffs. And that fools them into thinking that he is one of them. And you noticed in this movie that when the cage that the slaves are in is open and Django runs off and the white men are all dead, they stay in the cage because they are still trapped by their colonized mind, while Django has been freed of this the whole movie, and he goes off to kill Massa, but that ruins the very end, but you should have already seen it by now. This is part of rejecting their messages of superiority in your own mind, right? Of understanding their racism, sexism, homophobia, their blindness, their ignorance. All of that is a comment on them, right? It's not about you, right? It speaks to their receipt of bias, to their problems. Yes, racism, sexism, homophobia, this is your problem in that it may be a hurdle for you in your life, but these are biases that exist in minds. And if someone opens their mouth to show you their bias, they're saying, I have a problem. It doesn't have to become your problem. Which comes to the fourth and final part of the shield, a rock-solid sense of self-confidence that's walled off from the rest of the world, that can't be touched, because it's not a self-confidence built on something like, I succeeded at this, ergo I have confidence. No, it's not based on a resume item. It's based on you. It's based on your willingness to bet on yourself. It's your willingness to believe in yourself for no good reason at all, except that you know how freaking dope you are and no one can tell you different. You know that you're dope and special and good looking and smart, and while you maintain a humility to know there's more you can learn, there's always more you can learn, you can always get better, but you should also know that you are awesome and the world just needs to catch up. See, you got to look at intelligence as comprised of two parts: the analysis machine, which is like the engine, and then what you know in terms of the facts and opinions that you've come across and evaluated. That sort of is the gas as opposed to the engine to the analysis machine. And you can always acquire more gas, new gas, whatever, and you can always sharpen the analysis machine. But just because you don't have as much knowledge or education as someone else, you can always acquire that if you have a strong analysis machine. But both of these parts are flexible. Both can be made stronger. Intelligence is not some fixed quantity that's handed out at birth, all right, and that's all you've got. No, intelligence means mentally strong. Right? Great analysis machine and impressive knowledge base. Great engine, lots of gas. But you can improve both your engine and the amount of gas. Both are changeable. And when you know that, you know there's no biological reason that you can't be the smartest person you know. If I said, I can train you to be faster or stronger or thinner, you would believe that. Well, the mind is just another muscle. And you can build and develop it just like you can go to the gym and get thinner or stronger or faster. And when you know that, it takes some of the power away from white supremacy and makes you feel like your potential is greater. And it helps you build that rock-solid self-confidence that's based on nothing but your knowledge that you need and deserve to be self-confident because you woke up this morning and you had the strength to get out of bed. Yes, for doing that each day, I want you to believe that you can move mountains. I want you to believe that you can do anything. Because it's not that you'll do something amazing and develop self-confidence from that. You've got to develop your self-confidence on your own, and that will help propel you to catch your dreams. I conclude with an example of the sort of confidence that I'm talking about. And you'll see in this story, you can train your mind to be more confident. You can be conscious about insisting on positive, nurturing internal self-talk and rejecting negative self-talk. If you get into the habit of saying positive things about yourself to yourself and not saying negative things to quiet the negative voices inside you, then you start to grow more powerful and develop that self-confidence that can be an amazing engine. And you can control that stuff, right? I work very hard at controlling that stuff, of talking to myself in positive ways and rejecting the negative voice when it tries to come up. Let me tell you about someone else who did that, someone who engineered that internal conversation, and now everybody in this room knows who he is. About 14 years ago, Rolling Stone magazine sent me to New Jersey to interview this hot new rapper/producer who had a hit on the radio about Jesus, a guy from Chicago. Thank you. You're still with me. Okay. So I go out to Jersey to Kanye's apartment in this high rise, and he's in his bedroom for like an hour trying to get dressed. Which polo shirt? For an hour. So I'm walking around his place, looking around, seeing what's what. This is long ago Kanye, right? Chop Up the Soul Kanye, right? Way before Kim Kanye, right? He's just starting out, he's still small, first album. Later that night, he would go perform at Keene College to an audience about this size, right? Small Kanye. So I'm walking around his house, and on the wall in his house, about the size of this screen, there's a poster of Kanye. Like, Kanye Loves Kanye started like a long time ago. So when he finally comes out and got the outfit all perfect, I say, dude, what's up with the poster of you on the wall in your place? And he actually said something brilliant. He said, I have to cheer for me before anyone else can cheer for me. And it's a brilliant statement. It leads to the sort of megalomaniacal Kanye we would get later. But he was unabashed about being his own biggest fan at a time he needed that to have the ego boost he needed to get up the mountain that he wanted to climb. And that's what I want for you. That's what I want you to develop. Be the biggest fan of you. Be the most certain that you are awesome and brilliant, while you hold on to the humility to learn more and that you can always improve and grow, right? But even though you may not yet have accomplished much, be your biggest fan. Don't go home and put an actual poster of yourself on the wall in your house. But do put a poster of yourself on the wall in your mind. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. This was fantastic and something that I think I took a lot from, and I know that everyone in the audience took a lot from. We have some really wonderful questions that came in via the email account, but also we have 2 microphones set up, so if you want to make your way down and ask questions that way, we would welcome that as well. But I'm going to start out with one of the questions that we received, and that's about intersectionality and sort of hierarchy of oppression. Would you be able to say a little bit about that?
I mean, well, sure. I mean, when I think about intersectionality, I think about how we understand that we're not one thing, that we're always dealing with multiple things, right? We can't just talk about white people, white men, white women. I mean, when the sisters are hitting us with black male privilege, we have to deal with that, right? We have to deal with that there are different levels. I want to understand and meet everybody where they are and deal with them and their challenges, right? And I don't find it effective or valuable to say, well, this challenge is worse than that challenge, right? Because then we get into a sort of oppression Olympics where like, well, my burden is worse than your burden. Well, my people's burden is 400 years old. Well, mine is 4,000 years old. These things are not super helpful, but we need to understand that people are coming at these questions from multiple avenues, and that to me is what intersectionality is about.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you. Another one that I really appreciated seeing, how can people of color beat their own stereotypes perpetuated by parents and our families?
How can we beat stereotypes perpetuated by our own parents and families? Easy question. Please come down, sir, please, because these email questions are not working out for me right now. I mean, look, you can never not be your family, right? Like they're deeply inside you. And, we can learn to see where things are not helpful to us. I mean, part of what I was talking about in my book about post-blackness was just being able to do whatever you want as a black person and never saying, well, black people don't do that, so I'm not going to do that. I think my mother probably still finds it weird that I do yoga and meditate. She does not understand what that's about. To her, these are not things that black people do. But I'm not going to hold myself back from doing these things that have had appreciable, noticeable value in my life and have helped me because they're not her received vision of what it means to be a black person. I think we want to reject the things that come from our parents. So if we can we can interact critically with that direct legacy.
It was a good clarification. So that was my question.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right, next.
Yeah. So my clarification was, I'm a first-generation American. My family's from the Caribbean. They were children of uneducated slaves. And then, I found out that I'm not the first person in my family to go to college. My great-great-grandfather actually went to college. But, my grandparents and my mom have been, hardworking, blue-collar. They don't understand, I'm an aerospace engineer. I work here in the city. I've got master's degrees. I'm pushing further than they have ever been. But they still can't understand, why I'm going further. Then why can't I be satisfied with what I have now? So it's like a question, parents, you love me. but can you help me get further, or were you trying to keep me in my box?
Yeah. I mean, you know, we started talking about intersectionality. There's certainly a lot there, you know, in terms of immigration, in terms of race, and, you know, what they envision for their son. Are you the firstborn, or are you the baby?
I'm the baby.
So there's that wrapped up in it as well. You know, I mean, you know, I think we all sort of go through some of those things of like, your parents have a vision for you, and you have a vision for yourself. And, you know, if your vision is superior to their vision, like you're doing aerospace and you're like, you know, moving up like a rocket, like, they'll figure it out. They'll see. They'll see.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Thank you. You can go, and then you guys will be next.
Okay. So, is this working?
Try the other one. Yeah.
So I have friends who sometimes don't understand what it feels like to be the victim of microaggression.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily want to say your ignorance is your own problem.
Yeah.
So what are some healthy ways that they can respond as non-victims of microaggression? How can they become advocates or allies in the situation?
How can they become advocates?
Or how can they, not advocates of microaggression, obviously.
No, of course. No, of course. How can they become allies? Mm-hmm. That's your question? I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's their journey. I mean, like, you know, if they're your friends, they should love you enough to care about who you really are and not to, you know, people are not liberating us when they're like, well, you know, you're colorblind, you're not Asian to me, you're just my friend, you know. And like, no, I don't want to be seen as colorblind. Like, blackness is part of my identity that I cherish. I don't want it to be penalizing to me, but I don't want to be stripped of it. This is part of who I am. And if they truly understand you, then they should understand that you're going through pain because something that someone else said. I mean, they can interact with you just on a human level, but this is their journey. And part of what I want us as people who are not in the dominant society, not in the dominant group, to do is to think of us first, right? Not think of what do we need to do to change them, but what do we need to do to get you through today, through this college, to your awesome career, to your family, and contribute to your world in that way. Because your personal success will be the greatest revenge of all, right? Sir.
Hi there.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming today. It's been really wonderful. Thank you. So here's my question. It's about student debt. So, yes. So,
I'm not Bernie Sanders, man.
No.
That train was here weeks ago, man. What are you doing?
So, if we forgive all the student debt, then we help those who have been the primary beneficiaries of higher education, which is white people. So we essentially help the wealth status of whites by forgiving all the student debt. So my question is, I find this very morally tricky ground personally, because if we, do you see where I'm going? Like, I don't know, so do I believe in getting rid of the student debt, or do I not, because of how the wealth imbalance would impact different races and ethnicities and demographics of this country?
You didn't tell me this was going to be on the test. You didn't tell me. It's an excellent question. I see it a little differently than you. I think that there is more wealth well, we know there's more wealth in the white community, right, than in the black community. So there are more white people who were able to pay for college, or able to take the loans and be able to pay them back. There are a lot of black people for whom that college expenditure is not possible, right? For putting aside the people who are making the decision, white and black, who are making the decision that it doesn't make sense to spend the $80,000. That's another conversation that we're not going to have today. But when I think about the number of black people for whom that is an oppressive amount of money to spend, I would think that that sort of relief, that sort of mass relief, would be massively helpful to a lot of black and brown people. And look, if it is also helpful to a lot of white people, I'm not against that. Obamacare is helpful to black and white people, right? I don't, you know, I'm not saying like, let's just have special policies where we're gonna wipe out the student debt for black people and not for white, I mean, that would be impossible, right? I mean, like, how would we begin to navigate that? But I do think that an extraordinary number of black and brown people would be helped by that, and the wealth gap that we see would narrow that somewhat. You know, and just being able to get more black and brown people through higher education and into the workforce, that would be thrilling to me.
The other side, I have one question that came in that I really want to make sure we get to. Yeah. Can you talk about how the Black Lives Matter movement and how it fits into what you spoke about tonight? We had a wonderful, amazing group of students come through and bring the Black Lives Matter rally to a race and equity student conversation.
Yeah.
So can you speak a little
you know,
on
Black
that?
Lives Matter is doing extraordinary work and has been, I think, the most influential special interest group in this 2016 election, was fully shaping the conversation until about 3-4 months ago. Then we started to broaden out. But I mean, there was a time in this race when the candidates had to say the words Black Lives Matter, like they had to kiss the ring of Black Lives Matter to say, I mean, and that's extraordinary, that we had not seen black and brown, especially black people, demand that the Democratic Party do things specifically for us in that way in an extraordinarily long time. So I was thrilled to see that. I think that they are doing work that is not about microaggression. They're doing work that is about dealing with macroaggressions. When they're talking about trying to end the war on drugs, trying to deal with what, you know, the interference that police unions use, trying to deal with the militarization of American police forces. This is macroaggressive policy. They're dealing with systemic inequalities and bigger things, and thank God for it. And I think they're doing fantastic work. And I want to see them keep fighting. Absolutely. I mean, you know, over the next 6 months to a year, we're going to see if Black Lives Matter moves into, you know, civil rights movement 2.0 and has a lasting change on the country. I would hope to see that. Or will they be like the Occupy movement in that they rose up and we all talked about them for a while and then they fizzled out? It is up to them to see where they go next. So we'll all be watching. You were next.
Okay. Hello. Thank you. My 15-year-old self, who listened a lot more to the voices of the colonizers, would have benefited immensely from hearing the things that you said tonight. And I'm wondering if you can talk to us about, or maybe consider for your future work, the opportunities that you get and give yourself to speak to young people.
I'm sorry, what is the question?
Tell me about an awesome time you had speaking to a group of young people.
An awesome time I had speaking to a group of young people. God, I mean, you know, I speak a lot to college students, occasionally to high schools. Younger than high school gets a little difficult. I spoke to middle school once in Chicago. It was very powerful, but, you know, it was like, the message is here. And I mean, you know, I have 2 small children, 8 and 7, so I spend a lot of time talking to small people like them. And I try to deal with a sort of radical transparency and like, I'm gonna talk about as much as you can possibly intellectually handle. And about 2 years ago when the Eric Garner situation was going on, my son came home, he was about 6.5, and he said, I saw a sign on the way home from school that said, I can't breathe, what does that mean? I was like, all right, let's have the conversation, let's do it. Because he had seen the Eric Garner video because I had watched it a bunch of times. I didn't know that he was watching, but they're always watching. It was crazy when we were walking down the street and they were like, we know your iPhone password. And I'm like, how do you know my my iPhone password. They're always watching. So I was trying to explain race to my 6.5-year-old boy, and the thesis that I really wanted to get across, and you see, like in these sort of conversations, you have about 60 seconds in which the child can pay attention, and then after that, they're really not able to pay attention anymore. So I'm trying to get across, like, look, all people are equal, but not all people in this country are treated equal. And he's like, okay, but I'm realizing the questions he's asked me back, like the conversation is going less and less and less complex, right? And reducing, to where I finally am like, is he hearing me at all? And I'm like, what is a black person? And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, you and me. And then he goes, mommy. And I'm like, mommy's from Beirut. No, she's not a black person. And then I said, okay, Barack Obama and LeBron James. And he said, Kevin Durant, yes. And Tom Brady, no. And so, we're going to continue to work on, and look, I'm not going to go around pointing out like, there's a black person, there's a white person, there's Vin Diesel, we'll talk about that later. Like, I'm not going to do that, but, this is the primary young audience that I'm dealing with, and I'm going to try to give him as much information as he possibly can get. But this has to be fed in the right way. When Melissa Harris Perry's show was on, and Django had just come out, I went and did a couple of segments on her show. That was always super exciting for me to be on her show more than any other show on the network. So I did that. And I came home, and I'm telling my wife, like, yeah, and we're talking about this and that, and then I said slavery, blah, 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 blah. And I mean, like, of all the words that I had said, my son's like, what was that word? What was the word slavery? What was that? Explain that. And my wife's like, I didn't want to have this conversation now. And I'm like, let's do it, But I didn't want to, weigh down his soul with thoughts of, visions of slavery. Not at this age, right? I think it was like 5 at that point. So I tried to explain it to him without employing all the racial signifiers. Like, we'll do that later, okay? And later that day, he's running around like, let's play slavery. And I'm like, okay, so this is not working out at all, right? So they have to be fed in their own time. Now, that said, he got into these books by Nathan Hale, which are for young readers. I think some parents will know these books. They're gruesome scenes. So there's one about the Donner Party, right? Like, it ate the cannibals. And there's one about World War I. And there's one about the Underground Railroad. So I'm like, great, let's read this. And it was vicious. I mean, you see them getting whipped. And he's like, this is really interesting. And I'm like, great. So, it's a constant sort of feeding process, and I'm trying to feed him at his level. And my daughter, I haven't even mentioned her in this conversation because she's 6. She just turned 7 just a couple weeks ago, so she's not dealing with these issues at all. But I will feed them as much as I can, as soon as they're ready for it. Thank you for being so patient.
So my question has to do with internalization of racism within certain groups. So, for example, I identify as queer, but I haven't been accepted in a lot of gay communities because I'm not fully gay or I'm not fully straight. And so when we have these kind of microaggressions in certain groups, particularly, or if you're Latino or Black and you have these certain ideals and certain, you won't accept people because you won't to certain standards, how can you combat that, and how can you welcome those people within those certain communities?
So it seems like you're talking a little bit about intersectionality and not being accepted in certain communities.
So having standards within your own community. So to be Mexican, you have to do this, or to be Black, you have to do that, or to be Asian, because if you're not Asian and you don't do this, then you're not fully Asian. How do you, and especially when it's internalization about other marginalized groups, about other marginalized groups, how do you combat that, and how do you fix that problem?
I mean, you know, it's a huge issue, and it's something that I dealt with in my book about post-blackness. And I think part of what you're talking about is the self-policing that we do, right? The gay community saying, you're not being gay enough, or the Mexican community, you're not being Mexican enough. And, you know, part of what I talked about in that group is demanding the freedom and the latitude to perform blackness or Latino-ness or gayness or maleness however you want, and not being cowed or controlled by the group that says, well, you must perform it or embody it in this sort of way. And it's easier said than done, but this is work that you have to do. I mean, one of the things that I found in doing that book, talking to 105 black people about race and racism in America, that the people who were in the academy like this, when I would use the word perform blackness or gayness or whatever, they completely understood what I was talking about, and we discussed the topic. People who were not in the academy would be very offended by the word perform because they did not see it as a performance, but you do, right? We do. We understand that these are performances, and you have the right to perform it as you want. And again, that's easier said than done, but if you take for yourself the sort of idiosyncratic nature of you, right? The uniqueness of you, and like, guys, this is who I am. Deal with it, you know? And if they want to be what's your name? David. If they want to be David's friend, then you got to accept me like this. And if you're not accepting me like this, then maybe you're not want to be one of my close friends, and I need to replace you and bring in somebody else, right? Because, I mean, you know, you don't have to just accept whatever peer group is sort of given to you. You can shape your friend circle as you like. And again, I know some of these things I'm saying are easier said than done, but you know, all the stuff we're talking about is going to require some internal work, if not external work, to shape things the way you want it to be. But yes, in all these communities, there are norms that are being sort of pressed on each other, and some of those can be as confining as norms, you know, coming from the outside. Now, of course, those norms are received from the outside, right? They are not created by the in-group. But, you know, you're just going to have to demand the right to be David the way that you want to be. Over here and then over here.
Well, you already addressed this somewhat with the young woman, a few people prior to me, but I was just wondering, as someone at whatever stage of like enlightenment, having these conversations, would you not consider it somewhat a duty to suffer the fool, at least a little bit, when people have those biases, that we should not force ourselves on them, because that will, of course, make them double down, as you were saying, but should we not try to help them perhaps become somewhat more?
No, don't help them. Really, don't help them. That is not your work. I want you to be black-centric, right? I want you to, and I'm assuming that he's black at this distance. Now, I could have made a massive mistake. Right, you know, and that was a leap. But, you know, I want you to think first about what is valuable for you to get through your education, to get through your career, to get through your family, and not be thinking about, well, what do we need to do to fix white people who say stupid shit? Yeah. You're not here to educate them. Mm-hmm. You're not here to liberate them. You're not here for them. You're here for you. And we spent a lot of time on this in the previous section, and I think it was really powerful and really valuable, and a lot of people said really valuable things, and we sort of came down on a sort of nuanced sort of space, right? Like, you may want to call out something. If somebody says something stupid to you, trying to demean you, even unwittingly trying to demean you, microaggressing against you, you can call that out as a way of sort of, let's call it policing, to say, you know, sort of pushing it back on them. You're not defining me. You're defining that you're an idiot by saying something like that, right? So you've just pointed out, like, you said something stupid. But when you cross after that to, well, now I'm going to educate you on what's real, now you're working for them. And now you're improving them. And that's just entirely external work. And it is emotionally weighted work that will weigh you down for hours after that, days, weeks after that, it's not work you need to be doing. Their ignorance is not your problem.
I guess I'm just wondering, how are they going to get better then, though?
Well, here's one thing, because we're sort of coming to this loggerheads. You're like, well, how do we make it better? And it seems like your presupposition there is that the only way to make it better is to be confrontational with those ideas.
I wouldn't say confrontational, no. Like
well, maybe we could be nicely confrontational. We don't have to be rude and mean, but you know, somebody says something and we deal with the idea. I'm telling you, you don't have to confront at all, and you're saying, well, we must confront. But you know, as I said, I believe we said in the talk. Now I can't remember what I said in the earlier session or this session. Yeah, we talked about This American Life, that you can't convince anybody of anything. Mm-hmm. So if they have a deeply held belief about what it means to be black, you're not going to be able to change them. Certainly not in one conversation, right? I mean, like, you know, if you think back through your life, it's extraordinarily rare that you had a conversation with somebody and they changed their mind because of what you said in the conversation. That's just not the way human beings operate. And so thinking that you can say something that would educate or change or liberate or fix that person, it's not going to happen. I mean, look, these microaggressions hurt. I get that. I feel that. But what I really want is for you to get an awesome education and to have an awesome career. And as I said to the sister before, living well will be the revenge, right? And your productive career, family life, professional life, right? Educational life, internal life, those things will prove you stronger and make you better in the end. I want you doing things that benefit you, that work on you, and not on them. Right? I mean, like, and this is the time in your life when you can break those chains and stop thinking about, what do I need to do to fix them? What do I need to do to make them better? Fuck them. It's about you.
Okay.
Thanks for taking the time to answer these unscripted questions. I can't imagine it's terribly easy. But we were talking a little bit, you referenced a couple times Donald Trump, and this part of this talk was about living in this sort of post-Obama world. And we're at this point now where we can kind of reflect on the last 8 years of his presidency. And, you know, obviously he was the first black president, and for purposes of my question, I think we can all assume that he was aware that he was the first black president. And I think there was probably a lot of microaggression that he was confronted with. We see like the Tea Party's popularity corresponding directly with Obama's sort of ascendancy. And I guess looking back, and obviously we'll never know how good he was as a president for probably decades, but how would you assess the way he handled, A, dealing with microaggression on probably a daily basis from very powerful white people, B, also having like these big goals that he wanted to sort of accomplish within his tenure, and then C, also wanting to obviously not lose his black card, also wanting to preserve some measure of his blackness, even if that meant sort of offending some people. I guess, how do you think he handled it?
It's a great question. I think that that he's done extremely well in an incredibly difficult and complicated situation. I know that there are things that have happened that we don't even know. I was told by somebody who used to work for Dick Durbin, who was #2 Democrat in the Senate, is #2 Democrat in the Senate, I believe, that Durbin was at a meeting where some Republican, I'm struggling to remember, some Republican had, I was told something rude some Republican had said to him in a private meeting. Something that you would not imagine that some senator would say to a president. And we were going to report it, and then somebody said, you know, some other person said, no, that didn't happen, and that alone makes it too hot to report, right? But, I mean, I know that this happened. There's been many situations when things have happened to him like that. And the microaggressions at his level, you know, he's flying over them. He can't even deal with them. Some fool yells out, "You lie," in the middle of the State of the Union. We don't have time for that, because we're dealing with obstruction. This is not microaggression. This is a concerted effort by the other party to try to make your presidency a failure, right? So we're not going to do anything We're not going to allow anything to get through. And then when election time comes, we're going to say, you didn't do anything. Well, that's because you stopped me from doing anything, that you wanted nothing to happen. And he's been dealing with that. And yes, he has been dealing with black issues in a really interesting and powerful way. When he talks about Trayvon could have been my son, some of the other moments like that, or 2 or 3 other moments like that, has been fairly extraordinary. I think that he learned from the beginning of the first term, when he said the cops acted stupidly, which was politically impossible to say. You can't publicly criticize the largest and most powerful union in America, right, the American police force. And then there was this ridiculous beer summit where the president of the United States and the vice president and Skip Gates, who was wrongly arrested, and a cop who made a gigantic mistake are all sitting together like we're all equals. Like, that was a fiasco. But since then, he has dealt with the situation as best as he possibly could. And I think it's an extraordinarily difficult situation, obviously, but in recent days, the approval rating is hovering around 53, 52, 51%. It is unbelievable in a nation so partisanly divided. And if his number lands where it's seeming to, around 53, 52%, that is an extraordinarily successful presidency as judged by the American people. And there is usually a tight correlation between the president's approval rating and the vote percentage that his party gets in the next election. So if he's looking at 53, 52% come June, then expect Hillary to get 52 to 53, 54% come November.
I think there's 2 ways to ask this question. So the first one is, how does this all fit in a global context? And the second one, more specifically, is how do we include international people, whether it be international people of color or international white people, into the conversation? And so the example that I use, I'm international, by the way. I'm international Asian, and I'm with my friend Asian American 7, 8 generation with a white person at a party. And so you can see the white person is hesitant about asking where you're from. And so for me as an international person, I would be very excited if someone asked me where I'm from, because it's who I am. Like, I get to tell them I'm from Malaysia. And in terms of like microaggression, it would be a microaggression towards the Asian American. And so how do we address that complexity?
Well, yes, you could totally understand where, unless you bring up the notion of like, oh, I was born somewhere else, or I'm going home, unless you said that, then yes, no one would have any knowledge of like, well, are you here or not? And that would be highly offensive and embarrassing to ask you where you're from. And John Oliver just played this clip of this. You guys see this? Of this congressman who's like going on and on about how, we want to have better relations because there's 2 Indian people in front of him. We have to have better relations with the Indian government, and we hope you'll go back to your... These are 2 people who work in the Department of Education. They're Indian American. And we hope that you'll tell your government that we want to better... And if they get to the end and the woman's like, well, that is a question for the Indian government and not for us who live on K Street, so yeah. Look, but the dynamics in America are mirrored in the rest of the world, right? It's not like America is white supremacist and the rest of the world is... The white supremacy that dominates America also dominates the globe. Right? And the preeminence of Europe is participating in the preeminence of white people in America, right? And the difficulties that we see in Africa and South America and the Middle East are contributing to people of color not being able to have more power in the world, in Asia as well, obviously.
Well, arguably, instead of white supremacy in the global context, there's an American supremacy.
I wouldn't split it like that. I mean, like, yes, I see, obviously we see what you mean in a world where America is the only superpower, without a doubt. But on a global context, white people have an extraordinary and outsized amount of power on the globe, so the dynamics just sort of shift into macro vision of the same dynamics that we have seen, right? Do they not? Maybe? Okay, go ahead, brother.
I was just wondering, like, in your career, like, how does humor, I guess, play a role in how you've dealt with racism and microaggressions?
How have I dealt with?
Or how has humor played a role in how you've dealt with?
How does humor play a role?
And based off those experiences, like, would you recommend that for other persons of color?
I mean, you know, look, in the workplace, it can be very valuable because you can't go in there with the sword every day chopping down everybody who says something stupid, right? And then, again, in the previous section, the sister pointed out, you know, the social cost that black and brown people pay for bringing up racism in the workplace. And, you know, you might get to mention it, depending on where you work, you might get to bring it up once. You don't really get to bring it up 2-3 times. So you got to pick a good moment to bring it up, because you're not going to get to 2 months later, oh, there's another instance of racism. Like, dude, Jeff, we're dealing with, you know, we're trying to make computers here. We don't need you pointing out racism all the damn time. You know what I mean? So, you know, in the workplace, yes, a certain amount of humor can be valuable if you are that quick and can deal with, you know, whatever pain, discomfort come from the microaggression and be quick enough to think of some funny, non-aggressive but educational way of being like, dude, not cool what you said about White History Month, ha ha ha. I mean, if you could do that, then more power to you. I can't do that, right? Like it hurts me and I have to figure out a way to deal with it and to use the shield and to push it off.
Or I guess I'm saying like more like internally, how is humor, I guess maybe as a relief for you, or in, I guess maybe lessening the impact of the situation? Or?
Well, I mean, internally, no. I mean, these are painful moments for me, you know, when I allow them in, when I'm not able to easily brush them off. They're painful moments that, you know, I tend to find myself going, well, I should have said this and I should have said that, which is the pain and the continuing focus that you have on it when the other person has moved on. I imagine I'm pretty certain that that guy who said White History Month has forgotten that moment, right? And I'm here in Seattle talking about it. So I don't find these moments funny. And sometimes the other person is trying to be funny, and I don't find them funny. So I don't find humor internally to be helpful. I mean, you know, one thing that I have seen, at least in the black community, is that a lot of people don't want to talk about these issues. Like when I turn to my sort of mentors and mention like, you know, some fool talking about White History Month and a job, da, 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 and they're like, uh-huh. Like, what else you got? Like, because that's normal. We don't get stopped by that, right? Like they're telling me silently, like don't call me to talk about some bullshit that happened on the job. Like, we don't care about that. Like, screw that, move on. Like, what did you do? What did you accomplish? That's what I want to hear about. So that's what I've been taught. And there's a sort of stiff upper lip that we tend to keep, which, you know, Terry Williams talks about black pain. That's a whole other thing that she's an expert on that I am not, that we are holding in pain that we should not. But to me, just sort of making internal jokes about it, it's difficult for me.
And this is going to be our last question.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, he's been waiting so long. Can I get, okay.
Or either way. Yeah.
Okay.
Can you speak a little bit about your experience as a light-skinned black man in your industry and how you maybe have had to check your quote-unquote light skin privilege within like your career?
Yeah, I knew I wanted his question. Can I talk about being light-skinned in the television industry? I mean, you know, wow. I mean, you know, it's difficult because I don't have a doppelganger who's brown to see like, well, you know, I got to MTV, but he only got to VH1, you know, like, it's hard to see, you know? I mean, like, we know that light skin is privileged, right? We know this. I know that, when times when I went on and I had a new makeup artist and she made me up too light, that I got calls, and when she made me up too dark, then, we got tweets like, what the hell are you doing? People notice these things. I mean, look, you know that it helps, it's not, I'm trying to say it's not absolute, and you sort of run up against these sort of thoughts like, well, Joy is browner, but she's just brown, and I love Joy, but she ain't dark. I'm struggling to think of like a truly dark person who was on MSNBC at the time when I was there, and I'm struggling, and maybe somebody can remind me of somebody who I'm not thinking of, but yeah, we see that. I'm not sure how to answer the question beyond like, yes, I noticed that. I'm not accentuating it or running away from it. This is the body that I have, and we know the prejudices and the biases that attend this skin color versus other skin colors. We know that. My job, my hope was to not allow them to feel comfortable, when there was an issue that I needed to discuss. And, it became almost, no, wait, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. Can't do that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Do you feel as if though you can speak on behalf of the entire Black community, though you haven't experienced maybe the same extent of oppression?
Thank you, I learned in college that I should never be in the position of speaking for the Black community. And that was a fantastic burden lifted off of me, because I can't know. And it's funny because folks remind you, what were we talking about? I remember being on the Dylan Radigan show with Karen Finney and Jonathan Capehart, and somehow country music and Black people came up. And I was like, Black people don't listen to country music. And as soon as I got off, there were all these tweets about Charlie Pride. And I'm like, see, that's what you get for trying to take the macro voice, that you forgot about Charlie Pride. I shouldn't. Unless I am working with data, like we just polled 10,000 people and there's what we got out of that, but beyond that, and I think that our conversations become sharper when we are personalized, right? I just wrote this piece about 2 weeks ago, right at the day after, 2 days after Fife died. I published a piece in the New York Times about the legacy of Tribe Called Quest. And one of the points I was making was that they were great evangelists for Afrocentrism. And there was a paragraph that was attempting to talk about the impact that Afrocentrism had on Black communities. And the editor, from a writerly standpoint, said to me, can you personalize this paragraph? And at first I didn't understand what she was saying, because this was like a 5,000 feet above the ground sort of paragraph, looking down at what impact did it have. And I hung up from talking to her, and I wrote, Afrocentrism changed me. And it was so much more of a powerful sentiment and an authentic sentiment and real, and I was being open and putting myself on the line. And it felt so much better than trying to talk about Afrocentrism changed Black America. And then I have to deal with these people are saying, well, no, it didn't really change us, and well, it didn't change this, and it changed me. And they were part of the group that were introducing me to Afrocentrism at a critical time in my life. So here's my argument, and it's so much stronger. And as I said, it's so much more liberating to not walk around with the race on your back. And this is part of what I've been trying to talk about in terms of not feeling the need to educate, the suckers who come up and want to say stupid stuff, right? Because in that moment, if you are representing the race, then you need to speak back to them. If you are representing just you, then it's like, this moment is forgettable. You guys are fools. I'm going this way to go study, so I make sure I get an A on my test, get this knowledge, and move on my career, my family, my life. It's too much weight. It's too much weight, and it can't be done. Thank you for your patience.
A couple things. First of all, just to celebrate, in this town, we have a black CEO of a company with 22,000 employees who's been there for a year, has written a book on talentism. So he can't give a plug and he's not here, but I can. If you're thinking about a cruise,
who is that?
Try Holland America Line. He's been there a year and I've heard what he's trying to do. So just in terms of a black leader that's in this town who I think's doing amazing things. I want to talk about myself as I just came back from the group psychotherapy and psychodrama conference. So in terms of doubling and standing in as one of them, being a 74-year-old man who went to school, was on the Board of Control, and was on the National Executive Committee of the United States National Student Association with Tom Hayden and Barney Frank. And when I think about how I usually mention those, I realized while I knew SNCC leaders and the fellow who helped the Black Panthers break out of prison, I still am not thinking of a black leader on the National Executive Committee. Oh my gosh. And went to the White Man's Caucus on taking responsibility for race and gender issues, and went to Mount Zion Baptist Church. And when I'm there, I said I should have come here by myself. I should have come here a long time ago, because there was stuff still going on in me that I saw that I was projecting, and it said to take that responsibility. So I want to invite you to say, as one of them, that because when I see it inside of me, then I can talk better to folks that are perpetrating these injustices or these point of views. So I just want to invite you to talk to someone that I can recognize. I came here for recognizing the sensibilities of microaggressions that I commit. Is there anything else you'd want to say so that I can see it, so I can say to others, it's in me too, and I just noticed it in you?
Yeah, no, I mean, that was very powerful and a beautiful sentiment. I mean, ultimately, so often when these sorts of things happen in our private lives or in larger lives, the dynamic that happens is the aggrieved group, be it blacks or gay people or women or what have you, they are speaking back to the oppressive person or oppressive group. And I'm like, we need allies. We need intersectional allies. We need white people speaking back to white people about, hey, that's racist, and you shouldn't say that. We need straight people policing straight people, speaking back to them, men speaking back to men when they are misogynist and sexist. Only when we get that sort of internal group policing are we actually going to really start to move forward. Because it's, again, I'm spending my social capital and I'm biased when I'm like, hey, don't say negative things about black people. But when you say that to your white brother, then it's like, oh, wow, this is different. I mean, I remember this is where you can be an ally when you're speaking to other folks about the humanity of black people that you have known on the front lines and in academic situations and what have you. You guys have been an extraordinary audience.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.